And a current affairs reporter in Dili, Scott Bevan, today talked with a journalist and a photographer who had an amazing escape last night. They were both also ambushed on the road outside Dili. So let's hear from John Swain from London Sunday Times and what he had to say about that incident.
The car was breaking down, so we were trying to turn back when we were surrounded by a whole group of armed men on motorbikes, and they went past us. One of the guys then came back, flagged down our car. He pulled our interpreter out, roughed him out. The whole gang of them came down the hill, and it was very, very tense. There was a lot of shooting, not at us, but in the air and around us. They hammered our driver, so he's lost his eye. It was hanging down by his chin. And screamed at us that we were Australians. If we'd said we were Australians, or had we been Australians, I think we'd certainly be dead now. They then took our interpreter away, and I'm very concerned for his safety. And we were then ordered and forced back down the hill in our car, which was then stopped again. Many more threats, more guns up to our ears, and then they told us go, and we very much thought they were going to shoot us as we went. I was trying to edge towards the edge of the road to jump into the bushes. Anyway, we just ran for our lives, and they fired after us. I don't think actually completely at us, but after us, and we escaped.
With John Swain was American photographer Chip Ayers.
Of course, and we knew that there were hostile folks around. They were burning houses around, they were shooting in the air.
The Australian Army launched a search for the pair using troops, helicopters and armoured personnel carriers.
I had my cell phone with me, and the battery was very flat, but I managed to flash a message to my office in London, who then finally got through and raised the Australian forces, who sent out an armoured personnel to rescue us.
I just thought, if I get out of this, it'll be a miracle.
A miracle happened.
A miracle happened.
What was your reaction when you did see the Australian Army?
I kissed the major.
You kissed them?
I'm not a big man kisser, I have to say, but even if we live in France, we sort of give a little peck on the cheek, and I said, thanks guys, I would have kissed everyone on that stupid APC.
I thought it was very, very touch and go, and subsequently, since coming back this morning, I've learned that another colleague, the actual colleague, has been murdered in the same area, and he was clearly killed by the same people. It all fits in with the same timing. So I think we're just incredibly lucky.
And joining us now live from Dili is our reporter Scott Bevan. Scott, it must be pretty tense there today.
Mike, it's extremely tense after the tales of those two gentlemen and, of course, the killing of the Dutch journalist. I think it's been a sobering reminder to all of us that the abandon that was shown by some yesterday when they were seeking stories on the backs of motorbikes has been tempered by, well, the tragedy.
Now, we just heard General Cosgrove say that he would speak to the commander or a commander of the Indonesian army regarding whether the Indonesian armed forces were involved in either of these two attacks. Have we heard any more reports?
Mike, as you can imagine, in these tense times, the General is holding his cards close to his chest, so he hasn't given anything away since that briefing. However, one Army officer I spoke to this afternoon said he believed that a meeting did take place this afternoon.
But we've got no reports from that meeting yet.
Not as yet.
No, because it's important not to inflame this situation, isn't it, obviously?
Indeed. It's so hard to tell here how quickly rumour can turn into fact when there's no basis to it, and that, of course, can inflame all sorts of accusations either way. So everyone is trying to avoid that.
And I guess now that General Cosgrove is not only having to be an army officer, but also a police officer.
Yes, which he predicted, and unfortunately that prophecy is coming true. He said only a few days ago that he was expecting and prepared for illegal and violent acts, and sadly that seems to be coming to light. And in fact, as I speak to you over here to the left, there is smoke billowing from an area that is renowned for being a militia stronghold. What that smoke is, no one knows, but it's an ominous sign.
And finally, Scott, briefly tell us about the looting that occurred today.
I guess desperation breeds desperate measures, Mike, and this was certainly a desperate scene where 3,000, an estimated 3,000 people who had come down from the hills, from the mountains, from the jungles, where they've been facing virtual starvation, had run into the government warehouses and were taking what they could, flour, cooking oil, rice, and taking it away just for something to sustain themselves. And now I believe peacekeepers, including Australians, are trying to maintain the peace there and maintain the order and keep the crowd at bay.
Okay, Scott, thanks again for your report. Look after yourself and we'll talk to you tomorrow.
Thanks, Mike.
Real taste of what they're in for in East Timor, with a number of shooting incidents involving militia gangs and even the Indonesian military, although it's believed that none of the Australians fired any shots. Tensions are running higher than ever, with the Indonesian army stepping up its withdrawal and the separate militias joining forces and threatening more bloodshed.
A very dangerous day for the peacekeepers, rushing to investigate a volley of shots in Dili and capturing a suspected militiaman. He was roughly pushed to the ground. Soldiers were on high alert, speeding the man away in a UN vehicle. The situation rapidly worsened. More reports of shooting inside a nearby Indonesian military compound, apparently gunplay by TNI troops. Australians went over the gate to investigate. As their machine gunners sped in to give them backup from their Land Rovers, more soldiers also ran to the scene. About 20 of our men were then forced to retreat, reportedly after warning shots were fired in the air by the TNI. The incident is now under investigation by the UN command. It was one of 4 outbreaks of gunfire which had troops on the move today. At this location, Timorese were fleeing a militia group which was shooting up the neighbourhood. The events drove up the tension dramatically.
Get on the ground! On the ground! On the ground!
On the city outskirts, soldiers were guarding against trouble at every turn. This time they found some startled locals, but no militia. Meanwhile, Indonesian military control here is going up in smoke, departing soldiers destroying what they can't take with them. But the surrender of Indonesian military rule raises a fresh challenge for Commander Cosgrove and his peacekeepers, a relatively small force against a shadowy army of pro-Indonesian militias. He's now planning to speed up troop reinforcements.
I will say to you that I am looking to accelerate in a methodical way, but to accelerate the arrival of troops into East Timor.
While the TNI had 24,000 troops here in East Timor, so far the UN peacekeepers only number just over 3,000. It's all the more urgent after this alarming sight, a mass rally of militia gangs across the border in West Timor. These violent men say they now have joined forces and are prepared to battle against what they call colonial invaders. Back in Dili, one breakthrough, Australian forces taking control of the headquarters of the brutal Itarak militia. A small group offered no resistance and were put under arrest.
We've been told by the local population that it is their headquarters.
Our soldiers took away a large haul of their weapons. They also found documents, including Indonesian memos detailing food supplies for militia families. It is yet